Robbie Lawler was out of control.
This is Double Cross, the murder of Robbie Lawler.
It was going to be an all-out war with him in the middle of it.
A Crime World special investigation podcast based on my new book, Web of Betrayal, wherever you get your podcasts. I fully meant to go on to this auction today of the Criminal Assets Bureau because I had seen a pair of shoes I quite liked and they didn't look as if they were worn. They looked as if, and they were my size. They were like Jimmy Choos or something like that.
That was a question that the judge actually asked during the hearing of one of them. They're like, have they been worn? Were they in a box?
Oh, and they didn't.
So because a lot of
Alexander Owens asked that question.
He did, yeah, and it wasn't obviously because he didn't want to buy them or try them on or anything like that. But it was simply, I suppose, the argument was being made that these items were being used as part of the Daigou system, and that money was being sent from China, and these goodies were being sent back, and as a way of laundering cash.
Right.
And so there's no point in laundering something if somebody's been already bopping down to the supermarket.
But we don't know if the Louis Vuitton egg case had been used.
What is an egg case?
I don't know. Is it for your?
Is it for an egg? Like,
I'm guessing
like
it's something that you put your egg in. If you have an egg.
Like your boiled egg in the morning with your toast soldiers. You mean?
Who knows?
It'd be a handbag.
It'd be a Fabergé. No, I just think it's egg shaped.
Oh, it's kind of like
which I imagine is really
ornament.
awkward. Yeah.
Yeah.
Probably wouldn't fit into an overhead locker.
I actually totally imagined
We'd have to put those beepy things on them.
I totally imagined a little Louis Vuitton.
And then if you're worried about that, then what do you think the Louis Vuitton passport cover is for?
And the Chinchilla coat.
Or the Burberry Hugo the Lobster keyring.
Yeah.
Which is
Hugo the Lobster keyring.
And the Swarovski bottle stopper, which I think is probably, if anyone wants a little piece of Criminal Assets Bureau memorabilia, is probably your best bet.
Yeah.
As I was checking, they're about 80 quid to buy normally. So, you know, considering this one has been used.
I think, you know what, there's people out there who are going to get really interesting stocking fillers and I ain't one of them. But the most expensive item sold was a Rolex watch that raised 33,800.
Yeah, that was last year, which was the first time that they did. Yeah, that's the first time that they did this kind of annual sale. And I think it caught the Imagine so much, they more or less said, I think we're going to do this every year.
So that remains the most expensive item until we see what the results are.
And there's a couple of bits coming up. There are it will be a watch.
Yeah.
There's a few watches that might make that. But I mean, last year, I think it brought in something like €500,000, which on the face of it, you know, it doesn't sound like a whole lot.
Yeah.
But it would have included stuff that would have been seized as part of the investigation into Ross Browning and his family members. And there would have been other Kinahan-related people who. Can
you imagine me walking down to Hall Street in my Jimmy Choos and somebody going,
"They're mine."
They're mine.
I mean, it's a kind of a blow, though, isn't it, to the morale of criminals, really, isn't it? That this stuff, like, because whatever about a house and all of that, you know, there's only going to be a few people that have amassed that sort. This is their gear. This is really what they're putting their lives at risk to gain.
Yeah.
Do you know, it's in a funny way because obviously there's a few people that we've done that have built houses, but most of the raids
are buying
and all,
passport covers.
Yeah,
Louis Vuitton on them.
Egg cases and all. This is what they're doing it for. Amazingly, this is what they're putting.
Such useful shit,
but it is like this is actually what they're putting their lives at risk, their whole futures at risk.
Well, some of it is arguably it's a way to hold money. So that some of the Rolex watches are still in the boxes. They have all their papers. If you go onto the Wilson's website, it'll tell you whether or not a watch has. If it's in a box and if it has the papers, which means it's got a full service history or whatever, and it's gonna appreciate in value over the years. Some of them will, some of the certain models will. So it's a good way to invest your cash.
Where do you wear your Rolex watch? Like I don't.
You or I wouldn't wear it.
Would you not know?
We wouldn't be safe to wear it anyway.
You could wear your watch on a daily basis.
No, but you would devalue it though if you did that. I mean, some people would just they get these and they stick them away, and they might have one that they wear for occasions or to pose at pictures. You know,
yeah,
and then put it back
you would
in.
be afraid of losing it. There's no doubt about it.
But having said that, though, there were some small time. Definitely in one case, the partner of a fairly relatively small time provincial drug dealer. There was evidence given that one of the watches seized was taken from her wrist. So, you know, which is really sending a message that, you know, this really doesn't belong to you.
No.
So, like, to go back to the Chinchilla coat, yeah. So, I mean, it's the real deal. Like, I mean, there's fur coats available in every store, Zara, Stradivarius, you name it at the moment, because they're really in this year. But this is the real deal.
I do know somebody who's
Do you know what a chinchilla is?
I know. Is it like something like a mink? Or
no, it's a cute rat. It's a rat.
That's also a rodent. Mink is also
Well, it's a rodent. It's not a rat. Now, it's a cute little thing with big ears.
Yeah.
and a lovely coat, obviously.
Yeah.
But that's what is like. Somebody has like captured and murdered all these rodents to make someone a coat. Like, what would you want that for?
I don't know if it's
ever.
Yeah. Well, I wouldn't. Do you ever see a American Gangster when he wears the coat? No, that's what finally gets him caught. Yeah. But yeah, I don't know if you murder chinchillas. In fairness to is it manslaughter?
Mass murder.
Well, I don't know. But
so there was 130 items anyway that were up for sale, and we had intended hoping to get along to see some of the stuff. We were actually going to bring some of our experts from the fashion end of things, but we never got there because it's just been so busy for the last couple of weeks between the election and Conor McGregor has kept us kind of busy. But anyway, so unfortunately, so the next one we'll get along to hopefully, and we'll be able to actually touch some of these things, these items, these chinchilla coats and whatever else.
You can still
wear.
This hasn't actually started yet, so it's Friday the 29th, 1 o'clock. It's starting.
It can go still.
So you can certainly buy it if you want to touch it at this stage, but you have to put a deposit of €1,000 down, which is refundable if you don't buy anything. Yeah. And I think you need to. You probably have to do it pretty quick.
I'm just going to say, if Cab ever raided my house, there'd be nothing. They'd be walking away with nothing. Absolute auction pair of Nikes, you know.
Yeah.
How about you, Niall?
Brackets used.
No, not unless they have a fondness for Asics runners. There's no Asics runners out there.
Are you those Hoka things? No, there's none of those.
There's none of those being auctioned off by
Louis Vuitton, Gucci, you name it. So anyway, that's just something that's happening within the Criminal Assets Bureau this week, but also more importantly, it was an interesting little week in court for the list. Yeah,
there was, I suppose, a number of people representing themselves, but of course it's the High Court, not the District Court, so it can go either way. But David Rocky O'Brien turned up at one court hearing. He's the partner of Judy Conway, who is Ross Browning's mother. Now, he was never part of a Criminal Assets Bureau case that was taken against Ross Browning and members of his family that he used to try and launder his money. But the judgment was that the house that he lived in with Judy Conway, Chestnut Lodge, they were to get back a quarter of the proceeds of the sale of their house, but it was sold as one lot. So that would have been the whole property at Garristown, which included Ross Browning's house, along with the stables and the land and
slide,
Chestnut Lodge. So and the secret slide from the man cave into the garage where the motorbike was waiting for a swift getaway. So all of that went for $550,000 earlier this year. It was a single bidder, so there wasn't a separate price. So it was valued. Then the auctioneers kind of said, well, Chestnut Lodge was about $293,000 of that $550,000. So there was a bit of laughter in court when the judge, I think he mentioned along the lines, oh yeah, we agreed that the money would go back 50-50 to the couple. And Rocky O'Brien piped up. He says, I don't agree. And it was a funny moment. Everyone had a good laugh. But
tell them who Rocky O'Brien is. I mean, you're missing out the big bit about him.
He's an ex-detective Garda who obviously met and fell in love with Judy,
Ross Browning's mother.
Yeah, Judy Conway. And then the judge then, in all seriousness, asked him, are you still with the lady? And he said, absolutely. And he was there very much to kind of clarify about the valuation of the house. But, he wasn't able to kind of put forward any evidence, which of course would have had to have been done on affidavit. And the judge said, more or less, to paraphrase the judge, he said, look, you'd be wasting your time on the basis that you could get another valuation and it'd be a couple of quid either way. So we're just going to stick with $293,000.
And they get a third of that?
So no, they get a quarter. It's about 73,000, just over 73,000 euro. We'll go back to them.
So Rocky O'Brien showed up. Who else?
You would have had Charlene Waldron then, who has been described previously in court as the estranged wife of David Waldron.
Estranged?
Well, that was mentioned in court. It was definitely mentioned before because she was trying to hang on to the house. There was 3 properties that were judged to be the proceeds of crime. So we had the big mansion Darview Heights in Wexford that was sold off there recently for a couple of $100,000, and there was the 4-bed house in Leakslip that was rented out that had its 13 tenants.
Did that get?
Which one?
The one in Darview.
Darview. Can you remember? 500,000 or something like that. But it was it was 1.2 million, I think, was estimated to have been spent on building it. Like, it was a huge sum. And then the house in Leakslip was sold off for just over 400,000. And there was a kind of a stay on the house in Ratoath because she was living there with the children. So they kind of said, look, we'll hold off until September. So if the kids need to go to a new school, if you're moving out of the area and all this kind of stuff, which is often the case with these things, because they do respect the fact that a property can sometimes be a family home, and it's an important factor in Irish law, particularly in civil law. But when it came to the date for her to leave, the guard, there was evidence given then that she says, I'm not going. So the cab then basically, we're going to bring in the October sitting, we're going to bring a motion to show that she was in breach of this High Court order. But then 2 days before the hearing, she actually had vacated the property. So it was kind of dropped. So this argument then, or this hearing then, this week was about whether or not she should have to pay for the costs of the motion that never happened.
Oh, right.
So she turned up herself, all dolled up, very nicely made up and all the rest. And she asked the judge, could she read out a letter? She had a letter written. And
right.
The judge was, he says, well, hand it up and I'll read it up. But then realised that she actually had her own counsel who was temporarily involved in something else. And so the letter went up. So we never got to hear what the letter was about. So the kind of, it didn't really go anywhere. I mean, she lost the case. I mean, there was really very little. I mean, they went through kind of how many times she'd been told that, this is the date.
So she was kind of arguing that she didn't want to pay the cab costs for the legal
for the legal aid for not leaving the house when she was supposed to go.
Of course, you can,
which is contempt of High Court.
And they can be very expensive.
Yeah, you can rack up huge bills. I mean, you're talking something like 10 to 20,000 easily.
8 to 15,000 for a senior counsel, isn't it, for a hearing in the High Court?
And
is
then
that right?
there's other. So you could
maybe that's an hour.
Yeah, exactly. So you're racking up huge bills every time you. And of course, previously a lot of people got legal aid to fund all these challenges. But in recent years, certainly CAB have fought against people getting legal aid.
Well, there is no legal aid in civil law. So I mean, it's not like a criminal case.
Yeah, exactly.
But there is, with the Proceeds of Crime Act, there is provision, as they say, for legal aid, but it kind of has to be shown like there's a reason for it. And if you remember, this is where we heard about the Waldrons. They got free legal aid for a forensic accountant, I think, and a quantity surveyor and this kind of stuff, so they can challenge the valuations and their spending and stuff like that. And they got free legal aid for that. And then that was appealed by CAB when they realised that they'd also spent $5,000 like that they could find on a big, family celebration. And they more or less, they did ask, Charlene Waldron's counsel did ask for would legal aid be extended, and the judge said, look, there's no provision for that. There's no legal aid for that at all. So that was turned down as well.
Right. Certainly a disincentive.
I mean, well, it's part of it, I suppose. You hear that. I mean, Mago Gately was the same, and they were looking for free legal aid, which they did get in the end. And then it turns out the forensic accountant more or less came up with the exact same figure as the one that the Criminal Assets Bureau did. So it was a long delay, I suppose.
Is it wrapping up? Is it likely that there will be more hearings before the end of the year? Will everything be kicked on into next year?
No, there's another round before Christmas. And I mean, it was actually a long list this week, but I think there was only one actually fully dealt with, and the rest were tidying up from previous ones, like the Browning versus CAB and the Waldrons versus CAB, And I mean, it's just been, I suppose, a busy enough year, I think. They've sold a lot of properties, and, there's definitely more coming. I mean, there was a couple of new names appearing on the list, so we'll see how that develops.
And so these lists are basically, there's ongoing investigations all the time. Usually when there's a Criminal Assets Bureau raid, that would be described as almost the beginning of an investigation, because they're often raiding a property, a premises, or solicitors' offices, etc., to gather the paperwork, and then they bring that back into the headquarters, where a variety of experts will go through that, will follow the money trail into banking systems, into mortgages, etc., etc. And by the time it gets to court on these lists, the CAB have put their case together against somebody. Yeah.
I mean, like everything on your phone. I mean, we saw it in, your laptop. We've seen people who kind of get caught out because they have pictures of themselves in Mexico or in Harrods shopping and this kind of stuff. So that's all used against them, saying, look, they're living a lifestyle that they can't possibly pay for. They're telling people that, they're telling us that they're living on disability, or they're earning 40 grand a year running a plastering company or something like that. And
so there's no way. Delete all the pictures of myself and my chinchilla tux.
Then
absolutely, your chinchilla wife runs or whatever. Which way would you wear them?
That will not be unheard, Eamon. I mean, that wasn't right to say that now. I have enough nightmares at night. But
you can never unsee that, Nicola.
I suppose the thing is, it is a constant conveyor belt in the Criminal Assets Bureau, isn't it? They're always, the stuff that's hitting the courts is coming towards the end of its life. People can fight it. They can, look for the legal aid. They can get forensic accountants and everything. But this is the case that the Criminal Assets Bureau have against them. And usually there's either a settlement or, in most cases, the Bureau succeed. I wonder what the percentages of them losing cases are.
Well, we don't really get to hear about the losing cases because, they have to get passed through the Section 2, which is kind of the in-camera bit, which is basically where they go.
So they wouldn't get through that if they lose.
Yeah,
basically.
so if a judge says, look, we don't think this is one for cab, there isn't enough enough to warrant a Section 3, at which point we can listen in and we can sit in court. But with the Section 2, people have their anonymity is still preserved. So obviously, if somebody who has no criminal record whatsoever, and the guards are going in saying that this person is a major gangland player or they're a serious criminal, and the judge will say, look, I'm afraid the evidence just isn't there. The belief evidence isn't supported by anything I've heard, and they don't grant the Section 2. Then that's done and dusted. It's a pair of initials on the court list and we know nothing about it.
And listen, I'm sure they're so well established and going for so long at this stage that they know what's required to bother taking a case through the courts in the first place.
Yeah. And sometimes like stuff pops up on the list and it's literally a matter of, judge, can we just get the order please, because they've just said they're not contesting it. So people a lot of time, once they I suppose realise that they might actually have to pay a lawyer, they're not going to bother. They're happy to just give up whatever they're after. Or as well as that, sometimes then they'll try and fight it and they'll basically come to a deal. And usually the deal is that everything gets taken but there's no costs ordered against them.
And I suppose on to the next level of that is what we've started talking about, these auctions. And it'll be the sale of the houses, the auction of the houses, your Chinchilla
where
underpants or whatever that's up for sale. It's really well. But they are when the whole case is completed, that the state has been given these goods basically to put into the state's coffers to sell or whatever they do with them.
Not always, because certainly with, say, kind of the high-end cars, the argument there is that they depreciate in value. So if you've got something going on for 5 or 6 years, a car that was worth 200,000 is now worth 80,000 or something. So what they do now, once they seize the car, the vehicles, they sell them off. Yeah. And that money goes into an escrow account, or it sits there and it waits until the decision is made. So you don't, if your car is seized, it will be sold off. And if you win your case, then you get the cash back from what it got.
But they'll hold it somewhere on the money.
So the money is held, but not the vehicle.
But these items that we're talking about, watches and, Louis Vuitton egg handbags and various things like that, they have a pretty static, steady value.
Yeah, it's only the cars that they've taken to selling. Yeah.
Like gold and Bitcoin will go up and down, but again, they probably can't move with the market on those. They will sell them when they're...
Yeah, and obviously cash will be the same.
Yeah.
Anything that'll appreciate in value, they can hold on to. I mean, there was a joke at one point, there was the car sales were so bad in Ireland a couple of years ago, just during lockdown, was that, well, maybe we should actually hold on to the cars this time, that they might appreciate in value. Because there was about a year where you could buy a car in January and by December you get your money back and get a nicer car in return.
Yeah, I missed the boat on that, as I do with most things in life, I have to say. Right, well look, definitely I'd say some people out there will be getting interesting little stocking fillers. Who buys this stuff?
I don't know if I'd be happy if I got it.
Would you not? Well, I mean, not the second-hand shoes.
I've seen some of the people who are wearing it.
I actually wouldn't
You're unlikely to get it anyway to find out whether you're happy or not.
I definitely wouldn't actually like second-hand shoes, I have to say. I wouldn't wear second-hand shoes. I'd be happy enough with getting somebody's handbag that they hadn't really used very much, or anything like that. Yeah. I'd be grand with it, actually. Yeah. So if anybody's out there...
You'd be haunted by where that bag is being and what it's
I know,
seen.
that's what can you imagine the shouts coming down the road if I had anything like that, or where it had come from? Any idea who owned any of that stuff? Who owned that coat?
We do, yeah. And I mean, well, not necessarily the coat, but I mean, there's definitely stuff that would have been taken from Yan Yan Fan, who was the lady behind... Or she was linked rather to the kind of the management of a number of grow houses. Yeah. And then that all these designer goods were part of this money laundering system.
She worked in Brown Thomas.
She told the court she did, like she worked in Brown Thomas and seemed to be, quite the customer spent. Was it 100 grand in a year and a bit? And then you had Mary Cash, who was, who was described as being the getaway driver for a notorious gang of burglars. So she was claiming that the money that they bought their house in Portlaoise for actually came from her working as a cleaner, childminder and escort in Australia.
And she liked her threads, did she?
And well, there was a couple of pieces of jewellery that was found in their house, and as befits somebody connected to a burglary gang, they had a hidden compartment in the mantelpiece as well. So presumably that house is actually going to be due up for sale as well.
Yeah.
So
okay, so it all eventually goes. It's not worth it, Niall, is it?
No, I don't think it is. I
Do you
really
think so,
don't.
Eamon?
well, we're making money out of crime, are we?
An honest living out of crime.
An honest living out of crime.
Yeah,
Yeah, sorry,
I can tell you, I certainly don't have any Jimmy Choos at home or anything like that. All right, thanks a million. I'm Nicola Tallant, and you're watching Crime World, a podcast about criminals, drugs, and the underworld in Ireland and across the globe. Make sure you subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you can be the first to watch all our latest episodes. You can also listen wherever you get your podcasts.